Flying back from the G7 summit where he left early, he said he wanted better than a ceasefire.
Better than a ceasefire. What are you looking for here?
An end, a real end, not a ceasefire. An end.
So something that will be permanent.
Yeah. Or giving up entirely. That's okay too.
Donald Trump returning to the White House from Western Canada. And after 5 days of war between Israel and Iran, the U.S. president facing a stark choice. He can either approve bunker-busting bombs to target underground nuclear facilities or tell Benjamin Netanyahu that it's time to stop. With air superiority over Tehran, Israel's doubling down on an operation that was in the works for decades. And while bombing raids have killed hundreds of civilians, the offensive has also shown precision in assassinating top commanders of the Iranian regime. Among the latest, Major General Ali Shadmani, who'd only been in the job of Iran's top military commander for 4 days since the assassination of his predecessor. Just how degraded, then, is the regime of Ayatollah Khamenei? What are its options? For now, the Iranians still firing back, imposing far more casualties and damage than the usual rocket attacks from Gaza or South Lebanon. As for Israel's claim that it's reshaping the region, well, we'll put that to our panel today in the France 24 debate. It is Trump's move, and with us from Istanbul, journalist Borzu Daragahi. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
From Tel Aviv, Itamar Rabinovich, Israel's former ambassador to the United States. Welcome back to the show.
Nice to be here.
Her weekly Substack newsletter is called The Iranist. From Washington, Holly Degress is senior fellow at the Washington Institute think tank. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And Kevin Gafaiti, lecturer in Middle East Studies at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Welcome.
Thank you.
Your reactions on the hashtag F2 4Debate. Yeah, not a good idea, by the way, to interpret the intentions of the current occupant of the White House in his stead. Just ask Emmanuel Macron, who got an earful, both on the plane back to Washington and on social media. This was on Truth Social. Donald Trump saying, whether purposely or not, Emmanuel always gets it wrong. So he has no idea why I am back on my way to Washington. Borzu Daragahi, Donald Trump again on Truth Social in the last minutes. And again, with plenty of bombast, saying he knows where Iran's Khamenei is hiding, but doesn't want him killed, quote, for now, urging an unconditional surrender. Should we be interpreting Donald Trump's tweets, or should we just wait until see what his actions are?
I don't think we should be interpreting his tweets. I think that he's way in above his head. He's in a situation that is a threat to him politically, domestically. You see that there's factions within his MAGA coalition that are really against him on any kind of aggressive posture towards Iran, another Middle East war. They say their sense of betrayal. They talk about on social media, including such right-wing luminaries as Tucker Carlson. I think he's just conflicted, way in over his head. And I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is driving the events here considerably more than Donald Trump is.
You agree with that, Itamar Rabinovich?
No, I don't. I don't think that he faced a serious opposition in the United States in general, in the Republican Party. And of course, there are some different opinions. And it's not, it's not Trump alone. You listen to the statement of the German Chancellor, you listen to the very resolution of the G7. It's now become an almost universal position. And Iran is not to have a nuclear weapon. So he's not there alone. But like everybody else, he faces a dilemma. He does, the leadership of the Iranians does. And therefore, we have to see. And possibly also, there may not be a need in an American raid, because the very preparation for one, the very threats would induce the Iranians to decide that it's time to cut losses and to make a deal, to negotiate seriously, which they failed to do earlier.
And let me put it to you, Holly, digress. Let's weigh, if you're Donald Trump, the pros and cons here, because if the United States does go all in, providing those bunker-busting bombs, then that makes U.S. forces in the region a target. He's playing his cards close to his chest to a degree in that we don't quite know what he wants. Also saying that his vice president and his top negotiator, Steve Witkoff, should be on standby for talks. Which way do you think he's leaning?
Well, with respect to my co-panelists, there is division right now within the Republican MAGA base. We saw President Donald Trump on Truth Social attack commentator Tucker Carlson for him pushing against this fear of a war with Iran. We also saw that Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman that's been very MAGA, has also been talking about those concerns of a war with Iran. And even President Trump said that what his own director of intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, said on Iran was not accurate on X or Truth Social. So I think there's this very public divide that's playing out within the MAGA base, because this was a U.S. president that had sold to his base that he was not in the business of forever wars and that the U.S. was going to get out of the Middle East. And what we're seeing right now, what's playing out, at least in the past less than 24 hours, is a president that is considering getting involved in a war that the majority of Americans don't want, even if they're not, had not voted for him.
And at the end of the day, what will sway his opinion?
What will sway his opinion? I think that that's a real tough call, because just his the way he's been tweeting the past 24 hours, it seems that he's on an attack, and he's kind of almost made up his mind about what he wants to do, and that he's insisting that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. What does that mean? Well, first of all, Iran does not have one just yet, but it seems that he's suggesting that if they want to make a quote unquote full surrender, which is what he's been also pushing on social media, it's that they have zero enrichment. And that's something I just don't see the Iranians giving up right now.
The UN's nuclear watchdog reassessing the situation at the main uranium enrichment site at Natanz. It says there was a direct hit. It's too soon to say how much damage there is. But for Israel, well, the prize is the secretive Fordo facility. It's located half a kilometer underground. It's near the Shiite holy city of Qom. Oliver Farry has more.
It's the biggest non-nuclear bomb in the US military's arsenal and the only thing that can destroy Iran's underground enrichment plant at Fordo. The GBU-57AB massive ordnance penetrator is known as the bunker buster and carries a blast of 11 tons of TNT. Israel does not possess the planes to carry the GBU. Only American B-2 planes can do that, meaning Washington's involvement would be necessary. The US dropped a similar bomb, the GBU-43B Moab, in 2017 on a cave complex in Afghanistan being used by the Islamic State group, the only time it has ever been deployed. That blast killed 94 militants and also reportedly 2 civilians in the vicinity. The bomb detonates before reaching the ground, resulting in a massive blast radius, meaning it carries an extra risk of civilian casualties. Without access to the GBU-57, Israel's options include a series of smaller bombings or a commando raid, similar to the one carried out by special forces last September that destroyed an underground missile factory in Syria. Israel did bomb the site last Friday, but there was reportedly little damage. With its centrifuges buried deep under a mountain, Fordo is key to Iran's alleged efforts to create an atomic bomb. In 2023, the International Atomic Energy Agency reported it had discovered uranium enriched to 83.7% purity in Fordo, close to the 90% enrichment level necessary for nuclear weapons.
Kevin Gafaiti, if the aim is to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, is it worth it for the U.S. president to go all in and to use those bunker-busting bombs?
Well, this is a real possibility, right? And so far we can clearly say that the main path that Trump decided to take is the negotiation, right? A few months ago, he decided to initiate negotiations, direct and bilateral negotiations with Iran. He didn't mention that much the possibility of using force. Even so far, even now, today, actually, he was very vocal on the fact that he would like, and he would be very sure that the U.S. interests are definitely protected in the region. He also reassessed the right that Israel has to protect itself. But so far, he didn't really put on the table the military option or the military direct support of Israel. So, and if we go a few minutes back, Donald Trump talked about a ceasefire, maybe obtaining still, even today, even now, a deal between Iran and the USA regarding the nuclear program, and also between Iran and Israel. So far, in the mind of Donald Trump, I think the reality of using that weapon is not the first priority that he has.
And on the Iranian side, do they want to sit down and talk at this point?
So far, we can also underline the fact that normally the last Sunday in Oman, Muscat, the Iranians should have a meeting with the Americans, and they didn't. Were present in that meeting, right? So, regarding the Iranian side, they are not ready so far to reinitiate the dialogue, right? They are fully focused on the retaliation with Israel. So in the short-term vision, we cannot say that Iran would be ready to talk again. With the USA and with Israel, definitely not. But on the long vision, this is, in my opinion, a real possibility that we should consider.
Borzou Dargahi, your thoughts on what is the state right now of Iran's nuclear program and what the last 5 days have changed?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't have a damage assessment reports from the IRGC to know what has been damaged. There appears to be indications that Natanz is gone, that the centrifuges that were spinning there, enriching uranium, are gone. My question is, the intelligence surrounding this entire attack and the Netanyahu's statement that there was an imminent threat. I would love to hear from our Israeli co-panelist what, if any, intelligence there is that shows that Iran has advanced beyond just enriching uranium, because Iran could have an entire mountain of enriched uranium, but unless it advances the very highly technical processes of weaponization, creating a very refined explosive scenario that would cause detonation, that would be, that would be a real cause for alarm. But as far as I know, and as far as the latest IAEA reports, and as far as the U.S. intelligence is concerned, Iran has not really advanced on those technical fronts since the early 2000s. So if there is new intelligence, that would be very interesting to know about.
Itamar Rabinovich?
Yes. Well, I'm not privy to such intelligence in Israel. I know that the IAEA in Vienna is equally concerned and rang the alarm bells. I know that in the negotiations with the United States, the feeling on the side of Trump and the Americans was that the Iranians were not serious and genuine in negotiating. I think that the Iranian regime is also facing a dilemma. I think they reached a point similar to where they were in 1988 at the end of the war with Iraq, when the survival of the regime was at stake. And at the time, Khomeini, the original supreme leader, said that he'll have to drink the glass with poison and sign the agreement in order to save the revolution or the regime. I think the Iranian regime reached a similar moment. I think they'll need to make a choice. I think they can have a way out if they indicate to Arab Gulf countries that are intermediaries that they want to negotiate seriously. Then Trump can come into the picture and tell the Israelis and the Iranians that there has to be a ceasefire for a few days in which Iranian intentions could be tested.
Ambassador Rabinovich, you state that you're not privy to the intelligence briefings, but what's your gut feeling? Did Israel attack with this huge surprise attack? Did they attack because of a direct threat from Iran's nuclear program, or did they attack because they realized, well, the regime's on the back foot, this is a window of opportunity, we're attacking because we can?
I think it's a combination of both, and let me also state the following. First of all, the war did not begin a few days ago. Iran has been fighting us indirectly through proxies for 30 years now. Everything done from Lebanon, from Gaza, from Yemen, and so forth, with Iranian instigation and support, is a war. We have been fighting this war on the defensive side for 30 years, and a change has occurred in that regard. So the government, in a way, took a risk. We don't know. I mean, it began in a very impressive way. I don't know what the end game is, and we'll have to see how successful it would be at the end.
Let me ask you, Holly Digress, what is the end game for Israel?
Your guess is as good as mine, but from what we're seeing, it's that they want to make it so that the Islamic Republic is no longer a threat. But what does that mean? Does that mean just solely the nuclear program? Because so far they haven't been able to take it out. And I think, as you noted earlier, they don't have the bunker buster bombs to do so. And that's why this whole conversation about U.S. entering the war is happening right now. So, but I think that there is this maybe hope from the Israeli government that perhaps people will take matters into their own hands. And I'm not just saying this because we've heard Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu address the Iranian people and call on them to rise up. The name of the operation is Rising Lion. That harkens back to pre-1979 Iran, and the imagery they use is the de facto flag of Iran. So I think that they're hoping that maybe in the process of this, they will see a regime collapse and that this regime will no longer be around to be a threat for them.
And do you see that happening? Do you see Iranians rising up at the call of Israel's prime minister?
Right now, in the capital of Tehran, Iranians are fearing for their lives because of U.S. President Donald Trump's tweet telling them to evacuate. A city of over 10 million people. And so I think right now they're thinking about, will they live tomorrow or not? So I don't think that rising up is their current priority. But if this war continues, it's really hard to tell where things can go. But right now, the way it's looking, people are waiting for bated breath on the ground, including my family and friends who are messaging me, asking me, do I know what's going to happen?
Kevin Gafaiti, similar story for you on your mother's side.
Yes, definitely. What I would say is that actually with the attack of Israel, and just a little reminder, the use of force is definitely unlawful regarding the United Nations Charter, Article 51 regarding legitimate defense, and Chapter 7 regarding the use of force with the authorization of the Security Council. Actually, there is even better. We also have a flag effect. I mean, usually when a population is attacked, they are just going to stick together for the protection, for the defense of the territory, right? One of the other panelists talked about the Iran-Iraq war, and actually in 1980, this is what happened, right? Just after the Islamic Revolution in 1979, the population just stood together because of the war initiated by Iraq.
People
right?
rallied around the flag.
Definitely right. And actually, today we're seeing the same effect. Actually, the son of the last king of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, which is based today in the USA, New York, was very vocal. He was supportive of the Israeli action. He was talking about maybe a new chapter for the Iranian history, Iranian population. But definitely on the ground, we do not have this kind of voice which is heard. Right, the population is, as it was just said, is just fearing for its life, right? And there is, from my perspective, from my point of view of analysis, no indication that in a short-term vision we're going to see a change regarding the constitutional structure of Iran. Maybe a reinforcement.
Maybe a reinforcement. However, we are seeing that the operation has killed a lot of senior members of the chain of command. Israel's military claiming it's killed the current chief of staff, Ali Shadmani, in an overnight strike on a command center in the heart of Tehran. And this is just 4 days after he was promoted. His predecessor, Gholam Ali Rashid, was killed in a similar Israeli raid last weekend. Borzu Daragahi, is it about regime change?
I mean, Netanyahu, as was mentioned, has said that. I wish that his tone in such a grave matter was as temperate as as the ambassador that is speaking, who is speaking now, who's quite reasoned in outlining what Israel's positions are and what its aims are. But that doesn't seem like the Israeli position is actually like that. It seems a lot more hardline.
Let me on that score, Borzu. Let's listen to the Israeli Prime Minister. He was asked on ABC television in the United States on Monday about the Trump administration's rejection of an attempt to assassinate the supreme leader.
But U.S. officials tell us that the president flatly rejected a plan, an opportunity that the Israelis had to take out the supreme leader. Do you understand his concern? My understanding is his concern is that this would escalate the conflict beyond where it is already.
It's not going to escalate the conflict. It's going to end the conflict.
Borzu Daragahi?
I mean, I think that's fantasy. And I would love to hear the political analyst's point of view on this with his sociology background and so on. But I would just say this, that the leaders that they're taking out, even if they take out Khamenei, okay, you're taking out these old gray-haired generals who went through the Iran-Iraq war, who have a little bit of maturity and so on. As Holly knows, and as anyone who follows Persian Telegram channels knows, the next generation of leaders that are going to be taking, the power now, they have not seen war. They have not seen the Iran-Iraq war, and they're in some ways like quite a bit more crazy than the gray-haired generals that are at the head of the IRGC right now, who suffered in the trenches of the Iran-Iraq war and know the horrors of war. You've got a bunch of Gen Z kids who are kind of lusting for conflict in terms of the hardline faction of the regime, and it's going to be scary when those people take over. And if Khamenei is killed, there is a succession plan in place. Some other guy will come in, younger, angrier, less experienced. I don't think it'll necessarily be great, or the regime will collapse and there will be, civil conflict. We're not living in Sweden here. It's not going to turn to, in the Middle East, it's the guy with the guns and the organization that wins, and that's going to be the IRGC remnants, and they're going to, be ferocious because they're going to be willing to kill their way to the top. So regardless of what happens, it's not going to turn into a land for the likes of, Reza Pahlavi coming from the suburbs of Virginia to come and rule over.
And so when you say crazy stuff, what kind of crazy stuff could they do? Especially when you see in the last few days how much Israel has taken out a lot of their anti-aircraft batteries, a lot of their missile launching batteries.
I mean, who knows? But there's always ways. Iran has control over the Strait of Hormuz. They could do serious damage over on world oil markets, and that would be fairly easy for them to do logistically. But it would be cutting off their nose to spite their face. They need to export their oil. Those guys don't. I mean, those kids don't care. I mean, the people who might be taking over after this current generation of seasoned war veterans, they're, believe it or not, as extreme as the regime is now, and as as ideological as it is now, the kids who will come to power next might be worse. Itamar Rabinovich, that view of the Israeli Prime Minister to assassinate the supreme leader, openly talking about it, at least speculating about it, is that a consensus in Israel?
No, it's not. I'd like to make the following point. Number one is it's customary in international relations, in conflicts between countries and states, not to kill political leaders. You kill professionals, you kill military people, and so forth. But there's a line that you normally do not cross. Number two, with regard to regime change, we found out that political engineering in trying to reconstruct the politics of neighboring countries does not work. And our bad experience in Lebanon in 1982, when we tried to change the regime in Lebanon and suffered greatly for 20 years later, is still resonant with many Israelis who do not want to try to engage in trying to shape the politics of other countries in the region. Thirdly, we've been speaking mostly about nuclear, but let's remember the massive conventional capacity that Iran has. It now has 3,000 ballistic missiles. There's a huge number of drones. Some of these drones are in Ukraine, used by the Russians. And in the next few years, if left alone, they could get to 8,000 or 9,000 ballistic missiles and to thousands and thousands of drones, and could confront Israel with a huge, massive potential conventional damage that is hardly less effective than that of a nuclear bomb.
So, the operation of the last 5 days, when the history books are written, will it have been worth it for Israel?
We'll have to wait for the end. We are in the middle of the war. We don't know how it's going to end, and it's only when the war is over that the Israeli, let's say Netanyahu, will have to stand before the court of Israeli public opinion and to justify the risk he took, the casualties and damages we suffered, and the outcome will be determined. Was it worth it or was it not? But we don't know yet at this point.
Just a quick, on this point, Itamar Rabinovich, there's a lot of fog of war right now. Iran, about 30 minutes ago, warning of imminent punitive attacks on Israel. Where you are in Tel Aviv, we're 30 minutes later. Have you heard any air raid sirens?
It happened to me twice on I-24 programs that I had to get off the program and run down to the air raid shelter. I hope it doesn't happen this time. But we go down to the air raid shelter 2 or 3 times a day. We know what it means for us. It's not in itself. It's not a calamity. We have a shelter, and we take precautions. That's not the issue. But some missiles hit sensitive targets. Our most important scientific research center, the Weizmann Institute, suffered a huge damage. Work invested by scientists in non-security areas, life sciences, and so forth is lost forever. People were killed, buildings were destroyed. We know what the damages of war and the casualties of war are.
Holly Degress, our correspondent in Jerusalem earlier reporting that it feels this Tuesday as though there is less incoming fire than in the previous days. Should we draw any conclusions from that?
That is correct. That is correct. Less missiles coming in today. There were a few attacks, but a smaller number of missiles. They may have an economy of war. They may have less, and it's not just the missiles; it's the launches.
So let me put this.
Hit and reduce.
Let me put this to Holly Degress.
Yeah.
What capacities does Iran have right now?
I think, the assessment that they might have about 2,000 missiles, but as the ambassador notes correctly, they're probably rethinking how many of them they want to use and fire maybe less of them just to keep them, because we don't know how long this is going to go for.
Don't know how long this is going to go for at this point in time. What's the feeling, Kevin Gefaiti? Because we saw some testy exchanges in the French Parliament earlier when the foreign minister briefed lawmakers. If this is a long war, what will people be thinking here?
Here in France?
Yes, it's a country that's home to both a sizable Iranian community and Israeli community as well. Franco, there are lots of dual citizens of France and Israel.
Definitely right. Maybe we should also take into account the fact that this is a new chapter in the history of confrontation between Israel and Iran, right? It is not just one missile from each side. So actually, I think both states are definitely ready to go very further on the long term. And regarding the position of France in this conflict, well, the official position is that Israel, again, has the right to defend itself. And also, I think it is important to underline the fact that maybe the Europeans, I would put that, maybe the Europeans should also be more involved in the situation between Iran and Israel, because they were very active regarding the 2015 deal between Iran and the rest of the international community. They were absent during these negotiations between Iran and the USA. So regarding...
But is that because at the end of the day, it's really down to Donald Trump?
So far, so long, because the Europeans are not that much involved. And maybe if we go back just to yesterday in the last statement of Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, she underlined the right, again, of Israel to defend itself. And she very strongly affirmed the fact that Iran should not acquire any nuclear bomb. But also the Europeans maybe should take into account the fact that here we have a first hit from Israel regarding Iran, and the only way out of that is not confrontation, it's definitely the diplomatic path. So I think the Europeans should be more involved, and they can definitely be more involved in the peace resolution of that. And France, of course, has a massive role in this process.
Borzou Dargahi, your statement earlier ringing in my ears still about how in the Middle East might is often right. So when you're hearing Kevin here talking about trying to push the diplomatic path, what's your reaction?
I mean, from my sources in Brussels and European capitals tell me that they are too overextended on Ukraine to deal with Iran, that they're focused so focused on what is happening with the Ukraine war that Iran has just moved way down their list of priorities. You know, you mentioned history and how history will regard this whole conflict, whether it was a success or a failure. I think I just see two, mendacious 70-something and 80-year-old men clinging to power and using, the tools of war to do so, and without much regard for the civilian populations. Both in Tel Aviv and Tehran, people are scared and afraid. These are normal people. These are non-combatants. If you think back to the 30 years wars in Europe, if you think about the wars of the 19th century, no one really, except for historians, remember the people who waged those wars or regard them as heroes at this point. They just know that period of time was filled with a lot of wars and a lot of suffering, and we thought we were past that in the post-war era. Apparently, we are not.
And we're hearing, according to both the Reuters and AFP news agency, that there are continuous intense explosions heard west of the Iranian capital, Tehran, as we are speaking. Loud blasts are heard, in fact, across the capital at this point. Holly Digress, it's a question of, we had one panelist telling us on Monday how this could last years.
I mean, years. I don't think Iranians have the ballistic missile capabilities to last for years, because this is unless the Russians or the Chinese decide they're going to sell it to them. But I think this is definitely going to last potentially for weeks. But at this point, I think we really need to think about, you just talked about blasts in Tehran. What is happening with the people there? They don't have air raid sirens. They don't have shelters really. And the situation there, if it continues for years, that means you're going to have a mass exodus of people. And we've seen what that looks like. Europe's seen what that looks like with Syria. But Iran has a population of 90 million. So if this is going to be a years-long process, that means you're going to see a disintegration of Iranian society. And I think that would mean that I don't think the regime has these capacities that it did. It certainly doesn't have a people that supports them. I know we talked about the rally around the flag effect earlier, but this isn't the 1980s. This is 2025. And just before this war, Iranians were very much anti-regime. We had a 2022 uprising, Women, Life, Freedom, that was not successful in its goal of positive change, in part because the international community didn't back it. And that sentiment is still there. And so the regime has two fights. It has one with Israel and the United States. The United States still hasn't entered it, but it also has one with its own people. It's been at war with its people for 46 years. So these are some things we have to think about big picture as well.
Holly, ordinary Iranians that I've been speaking to the last 5 days expressing a measure of anger over the fact that the regime has been arresting dissidents rather than concentrating on the task at hand.
Absolutely. And let's look big picture. The Mossad has treated the Iran like a playground for years because of its intelligence apparatus not being able to crack down, partly because it's been infiltrated, but because it's also been so busy cracking down on its own people that it hasn't been seeing the big picture here, that it has partly led to this moment. So a lot of this is at the hands of the regime. And so instead of focusing on repressing its people day in and day out, it should have been looking around a little closer at who they were in their own apparatus and who they were talking to.
Itamar Rabinovich, you heard Borzor Daragahi talking about how you have aging leaders who will, by hook or by crook, cling to power. Benjamin Netanyahu has been accused of extending the war in Gaza to avoid having to face the music over the security lapses of October 7th. Is this part of his personal plan to remain as prime minister?
We have an election in 2026. He's going to run. He hopes to win. Right now, in public, or just before the war, in public opinion polls, he was trailing. The opposition was leading the coalition. If the war ends successfully, that could change. And definitely, as somebody who does think about history, he would not want to be remembered as the prime minister under whom the disaster of October 7 happened, but as the prime minister who ended the Iranian nuclear threat. So that's very much on his mind.
At this point in time, Kevin Gafaiti, your thoughts also on the regional reactions, because we've seen among them this Tuesday the King of Jordan speaking before the European Parliament, warning Israel's attack threatened to dangerously escalate tensions in the region and beyond, but also with similar sentiment in many Arab capitals. But, as the New York Times observed, there's a silence that speaks tomes over in Damascus. We have not heard from the new strongman there. Your thoughts on that? Obviously, he is the one who overthrew a pro-Iran regime.
Yes, definitely. Well, we have 2 points here in your question regarding the Middle East as a region. Of course, nobody wants more confrontation, especially the Arab monarchies from the Persian Gulf. Previously, you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz, but actually nobody wants the war to be extended in the Persian Gulf, in the Strait of Hormuz, maybe the strait being closed. Why that? Because these states need stability, actually, for their oil exports, right? And you know how much these Arab monarchies needs the oil to be functional, right, regarding the importance of the energetic sector in their economy. Well, regarding now Syria, as you mentioned, the current leader of Syria is definitely not a big fan of Iran, let's say that in these words, because the previous president, the previous leader of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, was a very close ally to Iran. Remember, his father, Hafez al-Assad, was one of the only Arab leaders during the war between Iran and Iraq to support Iran. So let's say he's going to be silent because he doesn't want any escalation of the conflict with consequences in Syria. Because between Iran and Israel, regarding the geography of the Middle East, you have Lebanon, you have Iraq, and you have Syria. So maybe, and of course, he doesn't want Syria to become another sandbox for the confrontation between these two states, as it was for the last 10, 15 years.
Borzor Daragahi, you have nature that abhors a vacuum, and if you've seen the way the tide has turned in Syria, the country that's between Iran and Israel, we have seen, you mentioned the Europeans occupied elsewhere with the war in Ukraine, the United States that doesn't want to get involved in more foreign conflicts. Right now, who's calling the shots in the region?
I'm telling you, as I said at the beginning of the show, Benjamin Netanyahu is now driving the agenda in the Middle East. He's driving the security agenda. Israeli forces have bombed in the last few months. They've bombed Syria. They've bombed Lebanon. They've bombed Iran. They've bombed Yemen as well. So, he is as well as, attacks in the attacks and ongoing conflict in Gaza. So he is the generator of whatever you want to call it, either instability or the reshaping of the order in the Middle East, if that ever comes about. But, he is the guy in the driver's seat. He's taking advantage of the chaos in Washington, the distracted attention in European capitals, the apathy of the Arab states towards what happens in Iran, and basically using this opportunity to do some damage. And as the ambassador rightly pointed out, salvage his reputation from allowing what happened in Gaza to become the kind of great big kind of banner over his legacy.
He's the driver, Itamar Rabinovich, but can Israel own it? Israel has got a population that's smaller than the city of Tehran.
Yeah, we believe in quality, not in quantity. But more seriously, I think the regional and international orders in the Middle East are in a state of flux. For years, Iran tried to become the dominant, the hegemon in the Middle East. It built a series of proxies, and it was seeking a regional hegemony. That has been destroyed. It lost. Hezbollah in Lebanon is very weak. Syria, there was a regime change. We see even in Iraq, some Shiite militias are not supporting Iran in this conflict. They are basically left with the Houthis in Yemen. And one country or one power that wants to take advantage of this is Turkey. Turkey is trying to establish a protectorate in Syria, the neighboring country. And of course, like Iran, it is a successor state of a former Middle Eastern empire. There was a renewal of the Cold War in the Middle East, but in the last 2.5 years, Russia has been a bit absent because of the war in Ukraine. So it's a situation where an assertive leader, an assertive country, definitely Netanyahu, possibly Trump, could make the difference.
And we have a National Security Council meeting taking place at the White House as we conclude. I want to thank you, Itamar Rabinovich, for being with us from Tel Aviv. Holly Degres in Washington, Borsut Argahi in Istanbul, Kevin Gafaiti here in Paris. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you.
Thank you.